Welcome to Chat Night. Chat Night Africa. Welcome to Chat Night. We bring you good vibe. We shine on the light. Welcome to Chat Night. We bring you good vibe. We shine on the light. We all over the world. Chat Night Africa. We all over the world. Chat Night Africa. Welcome to Chat Night. We bring you good vibe. We shine on the light. Welcome to Chat Night. We bring you good vibe. We shine on the light. We all over the world. Chat Night Africa. We all over the world. Chat Night Africa. Welcome to Chat Night, the only place that we give you good vibes. Chat Night Africa.
Chat Night Africa. Let's gang up, change mindset, and empower Africans. Are you ready? Africa to the world.
And now, live from the headquarters of Chat Night Africa, Divine Champion.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Voices of Africa at Chat Night. Isn't it ironical that someone should have to die because of the brutality of a loved one? Brutality and love are antithetical. Love and brutality can simply or should not simply exist in the same space. You heard of the case of Pastor Osinachi Nwachukwu in Nigeria. Her death simply shocked the entire planet. Unfortunately, her case isn't isolated. Far too many spouses out there live in domestic terror, and needless to overemphasize the effect on children. On Voices of Africa this week, marriage, religion, culture, and the law. And in order to adequately elucidate each component of the topic, we invited the Reverend Joseph Ajimvo, who will take questions related to matrimonial vows or wedding vows. Reverend Joseph Ajimvo has been married for 50 years and has officiated at near countless marriages. You see Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimvo now on the screen. Ladies and gentlemen, we also invited a highly vocal, fiercely vocal woman somewhere in the United States. Mrs. Lillian Fomunung has been married for 30 years, and as I have just said, she is fiercely vocal in gender equity matters. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mrs. Lillian Fomunung. Finally, we brought in a lawyer. Now you'll ask what a lawyer has got to do with this content this week. I have to say that domestic violence sometimes and oftentimes ends in fatalities. People get wounded, and you must have heard in the United States, sometimes the police have got to be called in. So to what extent is domestic violence unlawful? We have on the platform now lawyer Joyce Nyamboli, who will be taking questions pertaining to the law. Joyce, thank you for accepting to come on Voices of Africa at Chat Night. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Divine Chamukong, and I am anchoring this broadcast from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. On the 1st of April, I brought in a lady, ingenious, connecting life from Cameroon. This lady and her company has invented something called the ecological cooker. Lorian Sonkwa is only 22 years old. When she came here, she blew away minds. After her 90-minute performance on Voices of Africa, two ladies opted to help her. I want to sincerely thank Mrs. Tata Seraphine Langer in Maryland and Miss Beatrice Moma for the financial help they gave Lorian Sonkwa. And as you would discover, this woman did not get the money to go buy her perfume, cell phone. She is developing further her ecological cooker. This must be applauded. I want to acknowledge those two ladies who opted to help her. And if you have help, you want to help Lorian Sonkwa, please contact me. Now, let's get back to our content this week, which is marriage, religion, culture, and the law. And the first person to take my questions is the Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimbo. But thank you so much for accepting to come take some not so friendly questions on this platform, Chat Night Africa, sir. We are happy to have you this week.
Thank you for having me on.
And we will bring back Reverend Joseph Ajimbo. He is freezing on the screen. I will take Mrs. Lillian Fomuno to take questions while Reverend Joseph Ajimbo arranges his connectivity. Lillian, you are not anyone new to Voices of Africa at Chat Night. Thank you for accepting to come to take our questions.
All right, thank you so much, Divine, and thank you to the viewers out there who are, and also listeners who are going to contribute in one way or the other. Normally or usually my style is to joke around, but this subject is very serious, and so it is not a joke. Hopefully what we discuss here this evening will help somebody. I am hoping that we are not just, exploring a situation for the sake of exploring it, but that somebody will actually be able to be helped by what we do, or take the message along and pass it on to some people. Just a little correction of some statistics. I have been married for almost 33 years, not 30. Don't take it. September 2023 2022 will actually be 32 years. Oh yeah.
Congratulations, Lillian, on your anniversary.
Thank you.
I remember many years back, I was the MC at your wedding.
That's right.
I'm glad to see you are faring on fine with Professor Wap Fomunum. My question to you, Lillian, I mean, when you were married for 33 years, you definitely have gone through thick and thin. You definitely have had some hot moments with your husband. And it's not always a bucket or bed of roses and every day. So tell me quickly, what leads to arguments? What makes argument turning violent in conjugal homes? You're talking about people who took vows to hang on, to hang around, to be there in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, and all those beautiful vows taken.
Right.
So what turns arguments into violence?
Okay, first of all, I would say that the reason why this is a social problem and not a scientific one, not to say that social problems are not scientific, what differs with this situation is that experiences are different. So therefore, someone can be in a marriage for 50 years and never experience what someone in a marriage for 1 year experiences. So experiences differ. So to be able to say that, to give a definite answer about what turns a usual conversation into violence will be very presumptuous on my part, because these are experiences. But one thing that I know for sure, marriage is life. Let me just put it like that. Couples are also living their lives, but it happens that you are living in a relationship with somebody, and definitely when you're living in a relationship, there are bound to be frictions. They are bound to be frictions. The difference is how you manage those frictions. And personally, I believe that your upbringing has a lot to contribute to how you manage your anger, or how you manage, and education, not only formal education, but informal education as well. That's why I take it back to upbringing, has a lot to do with how individuals manage their anger. Let's give you an example. A child or a son who grows up in a home where there is constant violence. Now, is it a given that he will always be violent? No. But statistics say that majority of those kids who grow up in violent homes turn out to mirror their environment where they grew up. So they carry that violence forward. Now, women who sit in there and take the violence are also part of the victimology, the whole crowd of it. They come also from a background where there has been violence and they have watched their mothers sit through it. And to them, subconsciously, they think that that is exactly how it should be. So they too sit back and take that violence. So to answer your question, what turns a normal conversation into violence? A lot of times it depends on the individual, how they perceive violence from the time that they were young. If I have an argument in my home, I grew up, luckily for me, luckily, and I still say luckily for me, my dad is not a violent person. Physical violence is just not his thing. Even for us children, the only times I got whooping in my life were when I was with my grandmother or at school. My father whooped me once when I was about 5 years old, and I can never forget it because it was not his style. So when it happened, that's something I've carried with me all along, and it's because I just decided to disobey his orders, went out and played with my friends instead of carrying out the chores that he had assigned to me, and that's the only time. But if I sit in my marital home and I do take violence from my partner, that is probably something which I don't even see how it would happen in my case because I did not grow up in that type of environment. I didn't. And it doesn't just happen overnight. These are things that happen along the line. And some of us women, we give excuses for it. And we're like, oh, he's going to change. No, he will not change. He will not change. And I
Okay, hold
do.
it there, Lillian.
Yes.
Hold it there, Lillian. I just noticed that Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimbo is on the line. I'll bring Lillian back up on the platform.
We love Chat Night Africa. Keep watching Chat Night Africa.
And Chat Night Africa, broadcasting the program Voices of Africa, is reaching you from Washington, D.C., metropolitan area. Ladies and gentlemen, join me now in welcoming again the Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimbo on the platform. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Divine.
Now, Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimbo, so many Osinachis out there, Christian spouses living in terror, but who wouldn't break up their marriage because the Bible says God hates divorce. And I'm not disputing that clause, that scripture. But does God hate divorce mean a battered spouse should stay there? Because the only caveat which allows for divorce in scripture is infidelity. What do you expect a woman or a man battered to do? Remain there and pray?
God hates divorce does not mean that divorce cannot take place when the adverse is in play. God hates divorce is a condition that is given at the beginning of a marriage with the understanding that the two individuals who come together intend to stay together throughout their married life. And the idea of God hates divorce is meant to instruct that as you get into marriage, don't try it, don't make it as if you are trying to test marriage and then to pack out again. So that clause is there to give the intention for the two partners who are covenanting in marriage to stay in marriage as long as God provides. But where the conditions of marriage are violated, the conditions of love, the conditions of togetherness, the conditions of trust, well, violence itself comes under another commandment, which is you shall not commit murder. And if murder is intended in marriage, it is better to take the precaution that you better stay alive and worship God than to allow yourself to be killed because someone decides to take it out on you, violating the normal rules of marriage.
Reverend Dr. Joseph Jimvo, scripture clearly stipulates that infidelity is the only condition which somebody can leave their conjugal home. Was scripture written ignoring the fact that, or could they not foresee that somebody could get really violent? And if they did, if scripture did foresee that, why in that scripture, that piece of scripture, why, where God hates divorce, why don't we say also in cases of spousal battery?
You know, the biblical instructions do not are not a code of ethics and a code of law conduct to outline every detail of what is intended. What is intended is the spirit of the law, of the commandment that God has given. If marriage is intended to bring together two people who love themselves, it is not intended for one to lord it over the other. And so battering of a spouse is out of the question when marriage is concerned. And where battering comes in, it is treated under another consideration, which is, again, as I said before, under the consideration of murder. Because murder, you know that Jesus even said, when you get angry, you can kill by just getting angry. Because anger is the root of evil, the root of murder. And so with that provision, we have to be cautious that we don't get to the extent where we violate this rule of togetherness and take up and we violate the rule of murder by insisting that the two people who have been covenanted must stay together.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimbo. You have been pastor since 1973. That's a long time. And I would imagine that you officiated at a lot of weddings. I have attended a lot of weddings myself. When the vows are being read, you don't hear these limits or boundaries drawn. They say, well, love is long suffering, and to emphasize the length or let me say the longness of the suffering, love is long suffering. I get the point. We also hear wives submit. We're going to look at each of those pieces of scripture. But the point here, sir, is when you just teach at weddings submission, God hates divorce in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, without defining what the boundaries of a worse are, how can you say the church isn't responsible when people go above those boundaries? Because probably they didn't know. All they knew was, my wife has got to submit to me. God hates divorce, so probably I can do anything I want. Well, this thing is for better or for worse. And Mrs. Osinachi sat there, and it's alleged that she was counseled by fellow ministers and she wouldn't go because God hates divorce. How do you explain that? Would you say that's an addiction, sir?
I would say it's an addiction. I mean, if it's you know, there is indoctrination in the name of doctrine, and there are people who can get so indoctrinated that they carry they think they are observing the doctrine that they have been brought up. But I said, when we teach doctrine, we also explain the options. So as you say, the marriage liturgy provides for that instruction that is read out to the couple. But before the marriage liturgy is read out to the people, there has been a sermon that is preached. And I suppose that every well-meant preacher will explain that long suffering does not necessarily mean that you have to endure suffering for too long a time. Long suffering means going along with one another, being patient with one another, and observing they care, showing concern for one another, and so you bear one another's burdens. And so if the two people are put together, they have to observe the care for each other, and without lording it over the other one. And I know that the church has been accused of saying, "Oh, God hates divorce." But as I said, I mean, God. If you explain what God hates divorce, I have said God hates divorce is intended from the very beginning of the marriage to show that people should not enter marriage with the intent of getting out. But if you entered marriage and you discover that instead of being in a marriage, you were in a combat zone, I think we better bring in something that should be done about that.
You are watching Voices of Africa, and I'll bring our learned lawyer now on the platform. She has some questions to take. Lawyer Joyce Nyamboli, welcome her on the platform. Ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Lawyer Nyamboli, for accepting to come on Voices of Africa on the platform Chat Night Africa.
Thank you for having me. It's always an honor to be here.
Because of the prevalence of violence and the consequences of violence in homes, we've seen fatalities, children. Lillian said it. Lillian, I mean, she said so much, she'll be coming back. Because of that, I went to the dictionary to find out what actually domestic violence is. What I got. Domestic violence is a pattern of cohesive, controlling behavior that can include physical abuse, emotional or psychological abuse, sexual abuse, or financial abuse. That's using money and financial tools to exert control. Some abusers are able to exert complete control over a victim's every action without ever using violence, or only using subtle threats of violence. All types of abuse are devastating to victims. You are a lawyer. At what point is domestic violence unlawful?
Domestic violence from the onset is unlawful. Like you said, it's in many forms, but what we talk about, or what we focus on a lot, is the physical, because there's evidence of the violence. You can see a woman at work with a black eye, or with fingers around her neck, and you would assume that she was choked or something went wrong. But it could also be emotional or psychological and mental. So I would like us to always understand that whatever the form of violence that anyone is going through, whatever the form of abuse anyone is going through, it is unlawful. It is not acceptable. And we have to learn to recognize these traits. We have to learn to know how to spot an abuser, what are the patterns of his abuse, and learn how to handle it, But the best thing is to remove yourself from the situation as soon as possible. I'm not suggesting divorce, but removing yourself to evaluate the situation and see what you can do, either seek counseling or find any other solution that could help you to repair your relationship. But it's important to remove yourself first. You need to be alive, you need to be healthy, you need to be of sound mind, before you can have a good relationship or a good marriage. So the first key is to remove yourself, regardless of what kind of abuse you're going through.
Lillian, I don't know if you're going to agree completely with Lawyer Joyce Nyamboli. She says, remove yourself. She's not talking about divorce. Lillian, if I got you right, even before this show, you say once an abuser, always an abuser. So why not just, hey, this is the boundary, you cross it, I'm gone. Why not that?
Oh, Metro hit the nail on the head. Remove yourself from the source of the violence. Remove yourself. I'm a nurse by profession, and the first thing they teach you when there is some emergency, any kind of emergency, is to take the patients out of the harm's way first. That is your first thing you want to do. Get yourself out of harm's way first, because you can only live to be able to tell the story or defend yourself. You cannot be dead. Like the lady we're talking about, the pastor Oniche we're talking about, she's no longer here to say how it started. And also to reference the Reverend who was here a few minutes ago. The thing is, God says, yes, God does not like divorce. You shouldn't be getting into marriage with the idea of running out as soon as there is any little argument. That's not the idea. But the question, and they always say this, they always put it on us, the women, or you have to be subservient, or you have to be submissive to your husband. But people forget that there is also the other part of that same scripture from Corinthians, which asks the men to love the wife as Christ loves the church. Is he willing to die for me? Is he willing to, or is it only me who has to be on that other side for him? Is he willing to die for his partner? Is he willing to lay down his life for his partner? Is he willing to do everything the way Christ loved the church? Because if you love me as part of you, there's no reason for you to lay your hands on me. There is no reason. And I always believe the very first slap, you take it, guess what? There will come a blow next time. It will not just be a slap. But I don't understand where this comes from. Why would you, if you're a man, you are so angry with your spouse, why not pick up your key and just walk away? Why not just walk away from the situation? Especially this is the mother of your children. My God, there cannot be anything more serious than this. And
Lillian,
women,
I'll come. Yes, yeah. Lillian, I'll come back to you. Joyce, you say pick up your things and probably leave the environment for the time being. And earlier on, you said all forms of abuse is unlawful. Here's my question. We don't hear about abuse until you talking about physical abuse. And when I went to the dictionary on purpose, it's talking about even verbal abuse.
Yes.
Are women just saying, well, as long as it's another form of abuse, not violent abuse, physical abuse, I could take it? And then you nurture a situation that becomes explosive at some point.
You know, there are many things that come into play when we talk about relationships. There are women who want to leave, right? But they have nowhere to go. They don't have the support. That's number one. Number two, the women have children. So you're thinking, do I want to leave my children in this situation and have no one out here looking out for them? Women will be thinking, oh, how about the stigmatization? You see, we're quick to talk about Pastor Osinachi, but what does the Christian community do to women who run away from marriages? Oh, she's no longer a Christian, or she's not as holy. Are we receptive to these women who want to flee their marriages for one reason or the other? You know, in our tradition, we're quick to say, oh, a marriage is, we have to fix this, we have to cover things, it's the roof that covers everybody's home. You have to get into a home to know what is going on. But there's the stigmatization of divorcees. So who would want to, you know, endure that? There's the kind of respect that married women earn, which single women do not. Talk less of divorcees. So we could blame the victims of domestic abuse because they do not leave. But what are the choices we're giving them? What are the resources that we're offering to support them if they want to leave? So women always put these things into contemplation before they make the decision to leave. But what our message should be henceforth is, regardless what you're going through, leave. Okay, you cannot take care of your kids if you're dead, or if you're paralyzed, or you're blind in the eye, or if you are going through mental health disorders because you're enduring that kind of abuse. First of all, remove yourself, and then we can figure out the rest from there. And let's try to offer the support as a society, as family, to women who are victims. That way, it makes it easier for them to tell their story, and it makes it easier for them to make the decisions as soon as they notice the first signs of abuse.
There is a lot of conversations in the green room. I am reading comments from Helen Dillis Ajimvo. Naturally, your husband is on. I knew that you'll be watching. Beatrice Moma, very vocal against spousal abuse. Bel Sonke, connecting from Mali in Africa. Verbal, emotional abuse is dangerous as you die silently with no one knowing what you are going through. Juan Jacob, we'll be reading all those comments. Now, I ask you a question. In the United States, when somebody gets violent, Sometimes, not sometimes, women are advised to call 911. That's the emergency security service number. We heard other forms of abuse. Now, when the police shows up, what are the police looking for? Because they don't always show up and arrest somebody. So when the police shows up, what are they looking for?
So usually the police would show up when it's physical abuse because there's evidence, right? But like I said, there's verbal, there's sexual, there's spousal rape, which is seldom reported. Which is another
What do you
form of,
mean by that?
like a husband forcing the wife to have sexual intercourse with her without her consent. Like it's a conjugal right, but it's my body, my right. So if I'm not in the mood, you cannot oblige me to because you're in the mood. It has to be consensual. And when the husband insists and forces the wife to have sex, that is what we call spousal rape. Okay, but that is seldom reported as well. That's another form of abuse. But most of the times we always refer to physical abuse because we're looking for evidence. And let's not only limit this conversation to women. Women, by far, more than 55% are victims of domestic violence, but we have an about 8% to 10% men who suffer at the hands of their intimate partners as well. So it goes both ways. But what would usually happen when it's a 911 call is that the police would remove the abuser from the premises. They call that an emergency protective order, which would have the abuser leave the premises for 3 to 7 days. It's a temporary measure which gives the victim time to file for a more permanent or restraining order against the abuser. So when the police arrives at the scene, they're looking for signs of abuse. They'll look around the house to see whether there was any holes in the wall or there's a disorder somewhere, to see the sign of a fight. And then look at the body of the person who placed the call. They try to remove all weapons and things of the sort. And then they would ask the abuser to leave the house. And then the victim is given time to regroup and maybe proceed with legal action to get a more permanent protective order, which is what we usually refer to as a restraining order.
Thank you, Lawyer Joyce Nyamboli. You talked about, marriage is a sexual union. Sisters and brothers don't get married. You're going to have sex. Okay. Yeah. If the husband is, quote, forcing himself on the wife, the supposition is that the wife was refusing to offer the sex. Is refusal also sexual violence, ma'am?
It is not considered sexual violence. That would be refusal of the matrimonial right, which could also be construed as constructive desertion. There are many ways that you can label a wife's refusal to have sex, but for the most part, it is her body and it is her right to have sex when she wants to and when she doesn't. But we should understand also that a marriage is a consensual union, right? And it is a union in which one person meets the other's needs and vice versa. So a woman should not deliberately withhold sex. But for whatever reason, we've had cases where women are just out of delivery, they're still in recovery, or they are sick, or they're going through a mental challenge, and they're not just in the place to have that kind of emotional connection, but the other party is not empathetic towards that, and they compel them or force themselves on them, like it's my right, I'm going to take it anyway, or they betray them, or they tend to insult. That is manipulation. That is a power play. That is another form of domestic violence we're talking about right now. So regardless of what a woman is dealing with, I think the use of force is what the problem is. There are many ways of resolving an issue without resorting to force, right? When we resort to force and have a power struggle, or to show that I'm the superior gender, or I'm the man in this relationship, that is what we talk about abuse. But naturally, sex should be something that should be agreed on and entered into consensually by both parties, whether married or not.
Thank you, Joyce. We will bring up Lillian at this point, and then Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimbo. You are watching Voices of Africa on the platform Chat Night Africa. My name is Divine Chamakong. I thank all of you for watching this broadcast, and tell somebody about Voices of Africa. This is the kind of content we carry on this platform, life-changing content. At this point, we bring on Lillian to the platform. Lillian, statements before now on the show suggests elements of culture. To what extent is culture, and by culture I mean African culture, in play or in the mix when you have situations of domestic violence?
Oh my God, our culture plays a great part in. It does play a large role in conjugal relationships or marriage, because our culture, the African culture, it's actually built around marriage, and marriage is part of that our social way of functioning. That's the way our society functions, through social interactions such as marriage. And marriage is one of the very, very big platform in the African culture. That is why, like Dr. Metro Joyce said, unmarried women are looked upon, with less respect than married women. And so we place this value, but it's changing. It's changing because if from the traditional African society, child marriages were really promoted, where you are betrothed to your spouse even before the child comes out into the world. And sometimes the long dowry payment takes place, and then so the child is just given to the other family. But things are changing. The world is changing, and the more of our girls are becoming educated, the more our society is changing. Now, some may say it's changing for the worse, and some may say it's changing for the better, but any change at all is applauded, because the women are now beginning to understand not only their rights but their roles. I am a big advocate for marriage, a big advocate. It's an institution that I love very much, but both partners should come in there very prepared to handle the challenges of what that union takes, or what that union calls for. Because just being married is not something you just get up in the morning and then you decide and say, okay, well, I'm at that age, I need to engage with somebody, and then boom, before you find out, things are going haywire or southwest. But our African culture, it protects as well as it also destroys.
Talking about our African culture, and I'm going to have a follow-up to that, Lillian. Here is what Kwan Jacob says. Abuse is not accepted in any African culture, and calling the police is not also our culture. Where do we strike the balance? I'm sure that probably Lawyer Nyamboli will answer that. What's your response to him?
Well, I think that because calling the police is not our culture, yes, but the police is now available, so I can use it. Because before, our police in our culture were the family members. And if you actually take it biblically, the African culture responds to the biblical setup of marriage. Because what does the word say? The word says, if you disagree with one another, you talk to one another. If you cannot talk to one another, you bring in a second party. Yes, that's how our African culture is. If you cannot agree with one another as husband and wives, then you go to the in-laws. If the in-laws come together and there is no agreement, then they go to the higher people in the community or the traditional people in the community to try to resolve this. So our African culture does not really promote divorce. If anything, it promotes dialogue. But the police is in now because we are in a different setting, a different setup, where the police is available and I can be able to use them for my own protection if it comes to that.
We love Chat Night Africa. Keep watching Chat Night Africa.
Before I bring on the Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimbo, the question I have for you at this point, Lillian. By the way, if anybody wants to dial into the show, the phone line is open. Simply dial the number 240-603-7367. I repeat, 240-603-7367. 7367. If you are in the United States or in Canada, if you are not in the United States and Canada, you can do a WhatsApp call 001. Then you dial the rest of the numbers, and the entire God's planet will be listening. The angels, like the devils, will be listening to what you have to say. Lillian, a big part of our culture is children. And we've had situations women will not leave because of children. What do you advise a woman not doing anything, reliant on the husband, with 4 kids, to do when the husband is seemingly taking advantage of this woman? And the woman would not go. Children. Is that a justification to stay in abuse, by the way?
Well, look at it this way. The children also themselves are victims of this environment. Therefore, the woman has a lot in her mind when she's making that decision to leave or not to leave. It is not only about the economical support for the children, the psychological effect also of divorce, children from divorce homes. And I wish you could make a show of that. Children from divorce homes, let them tell you. A lot of those kids, when they grow up, find out that their parents were divorced, or when they understand, it has never been easy on them. I talked to a few of those children, and I have a few friends who, even till this day, in their old age, had wished that their parents or their mothers, and most of the time it comes down to the mothers to bear the brunt of this thing. And I don't know why our husbands or our men cannot see the psychological effect. It's not just the physical abuse, it's more the psychological effect that it has on the woman, who has to bear the emotions of the children when she leaves the home, and the emotions of the entire community, the stigmatization that goes with divorce. It is
My
a
last
very,
question.
very big
My last
deal.
question before I bring on
Yes.
Reverend Dr. Josela Jinvo and then Lawyer Joyce. When abuses happen and we hear of fatalities, somebody lost their life because of spousal battery, the question is, did this woman not see this coming? Are there signs of potential, are there warning signs of potential abuses? Lillian, if yes, what are they?
I absolutely think they are. A man or a woman does not just get up one day and becomes an abuser. No, I don't think so. I think there are excuses that partners give to each other. A man who is in an abusive relationship or being abused by a woman, he also, his ego is at play. He would think he's a failure if he lets this woman go. And then the woman on her part also keeps giving excuses. If he beats you, slaps you one day, like, oh, it was just a little slap, or they don't tell at all. Or if somebody finds out and then they try to ask her, and then she will give excuses. So we excuse these behaviors, and then it builds up from a little slap to a blow, and next time it's a gun or a machete. So yes, I think absolutely the partners don't get up one day and decide that they are abusive. It is little things, and it is sin. We see those subtle signs, and we make excuses for them.
Let's say somebody slapped their spouse, usually, let's say it's the man who's doing it, usually men do that. Have you heard of women slapping their husbands, Lillian?
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes.
Okay, maybe the men are just not crying
Oh
also
yes,
in social
oh
media.
yes.
Because not perhaps for a man to cry.
Because can you imagine if a man goes out there and said, "My wife beat me up"? What would it look like? That would be terrible. So they hide it, and they hide it. Yes, they hide it.
So is there a likelihood that the man will change? Because usually, let's say it's the man abusing, he comes before the in-laws. You were talking about the in-laws. The wife runs to the in-laws. The man comes and kneels down. Sometimes the church swears by Mount Everest or the tea in China, he will never do it again, and then goes right back.
Listen, we always have to listen to the victim. Sometimes we look at it and we're like, okay, he's pleaded, he will change. We are talking from the outside. Like I told you a story before, I have a vivid example. And we kind of counsel this person, this lady, please give him a chance. And she said to us, you don't know who I'm living with. I am living with a monster. And when I tell you I have to leave, please let me leave. listen always to the victim.
Thank you, Lillian. And in a moment, we'll bring up Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajinvo.
Africa,
Freezing again. It's freezing again.
Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajinvo, thank you again for being on Chat Night Africa. And I know Mama Dilis is watching. And you want to move a little bit to the left or right, Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajinvo. I want to make sure that you are not frozen right
it's
there.
Frozen. It's
okay,
frozen.
So you're going to have to come back, exit and come back. Time for me to bring on the learned lawyer on the platform this evening. What is it? What is, let's say the woman, because usually she's terrified leaving the children behind. How does the law handle this? If a woman had to just leave the conjugal or the matrimonial home, how does the law handle that, ma'am?
Okay, I'd like to go back to what you said about the woman leaving her children behind. You should realize that we always look at the economical benefits of a woman staying married because maybe the husband is the breadwinner and the children are going to be looked after. But the mental children we have encountered whose parents were in domestic violence situations, who grew up seeing their mothers or their fathers battered, always have a mental health disorder. It could include depression, anxiety, they lack self-confidence or self-esteem. Some of them are suicidal because they grew up in an environment of fear. They grow up in an environment of not knowing their worth because they don't see it, their mother being, treated with that kind of respect. So you're leaving your child behind with what? Or in what kind of situation? Which do you prefer, to have a mentally stable child who has less resources, or to have a child who is suicidal or who would down the line copy the same tendencies that they see from their father? So I think that the argument that women stay in domestic violence situations because the husband is providing for the family is no longer tenable. We can no longer accept that. Leave for the sake of your children, for their own future. You have to leave. But the law would always, if the husband is a breadwinner, make provisions for these children. It's easier to have that kind of enforcement for child support and alimony in the US because we have access to financial records. We have access to the husband's paycheck, so it can be curtailed before the money even gets to the husband's hands, right? So do not be afraid to leave because there's always a way to get the kind of financial support that you need. And there are also many organizations in the community that assist women who are victims of domestic violence, to provide shelter, to provide free legal counsel, and they also help the woman maybe to relocate into a safer neighborhood or safer city or safer state and set her up and her children. So in the US, we have a lot of these resources. We have safe homes, we have organizations, we have government supporting women who are victims of domestic violence to leave the situation with their children. But when we look at our country, Cameroon, we have limited resources in regards to things like that. Yes, there can still be orders of child support and alimony that the courts could ask the husband to pay when they finally go to court in a full family court hearing for divorce or something. But it's not as easy as it is in the US.
Okay, hold it there, Joyce. Let me bring up the Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajinvo while we can have him, because apparently his connectivity is having some troubles. Let me ask him one or two questions just before he runs into another problem. Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajinvo, is it time you people clearly state out or state clearly what the limits or the extent or how those vows bind the couples? Because persistently, I hear that the church. Sometimes some of the accusations that have been given the church or said about the church have to do with some of you pastors not wanting to offend some big donors in the church.
I'm not sure about that. My position is that every teaching is based on one's view of the creation account. There are two creation accounts. One states that man was made first and woman second, and that assertion accounts for all the emphasis on the husband being the head of the family, and therefore the wife has to be submissive. There's the first account in the Genesis story is that God made human beings male and female, created them equal. And my stand for that is that we have to understand and teach that both man and woman are equal when it comes to matters of marriage. And therefore, if we hold this view, then there is no way we should overemphasize the headship of the man without emphasizing the love aspect of it. And so the husband is while the husband might expect submissiveness from the wife, the husband is expected to love the wife. And submissiveness does not necessarily mean that the wife is to be treated like a slave. Submissiveness means that the wife should be obedient, loving, and caring. And then the husband loving the wife means you have to care for your wife. And in both cases, both have to respect one another.
Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajivo, if at a wedding you're officiating and you said, instead of wives submit to your husbands, you say husbands submit to your wives, would that be heretic?
I don't mind that because, first of all, I myself, I've instituted, the marriage liturgy shows that it is the man who initiates the marriage, and so usually it is said that the woman is given into marriage to the man. But when I officiate at a marriage, I make the man take the hand of the woman, and the woman take the hand of the man to show that any one of them can initiate a marriage. And by that, I want to establish the fact that the two of them are equal. And so I don't mind changing the words and saying, a wife, love your husband, husband, submit to your wife.
Thank you, sir. This is getting interesting, and soon I'll bring up Lillian. Lillian is a devout Catholic. She's a proud Catholic, not only the devout Catholic. Lillian, God forbid, if you divorced your husband, would the church allow you to take communion?
No. It is against the canon laws of my church for the divorced wife, but annulment of marriage is allowed in the Catholic Church, but you have to go through hoops to be able to have that marriage annulled. And at that point, you can be a communicant. Now, being a communicant, what does that mean? It simply means that you are following all of the laws of God. So I would differ with the Reverend to say that you can turn the words of the Holy Bible around to say that husbands, be submissive to your wives, and wives, to love your husband. Now, the idea of submission, I don't even know if people understand it very well. Submission does not mean weakness. It means you are so powerful that you have decided to offer your power, to bring down yourself, to allow somebody to rise. That is how powerful the idea of submission is. Submission does not mean subservient. It simply means that I am so powerful that I am able to bring myself down to allow somebody else to rise. And so that is the idea of submission. And you have to find someone who understands, a partner who understands that aspect of you, or understands that role of a woman. The woman to be submissive does not mean you're subservient. I keep saying this over and over to friends of mine, or whenever I have a gathering, or I have to speak to a newly married couple, or to couples that are about to get married. When you say, when your partner, when the woman, it says, when the word says the woman have to submit to the husband, it does not mean that you are weak. It simply means tone your power down. You are so powerful. And the woman, we have to understand, we are so powerful that under no circumstances can you, in all your might and your glory as a female, be even submitting yourself to be beaten down, abused, and dragged in the mud. No. Raise your esteem, take yourself up, so much so that your partner reverences you without even knowing it, without even realizing it. He is reverencing you without even realizing it. My submissiveness to my husband does not mean I am weak. It means I am so powerful that I have allowed myself down to allow him to shine. That is what it simply means.
There's a lot of discussion in the green room
I
for and
hear you.
against, and
Yes.
it's okay. I want to say that it's okay to disagree with any of the
Oh,
panelists.
absolutely.
We
are not
the
experts.
character and nature of my show is not like a central committee politburo meeting where people write motions of support and so on. So it's fine to disagree with the Reverend Doctor or with the lawyer or with Lillian. It's absolutely okay. That's the culture, democracy at work in action on this platform. Lillian, before I bring on the lawyer, you have been married for 33 years, and I'm sure that there are times Professor Wapfomunung stepped on your toes and probably you were wondering what brought you into this thing. How do you get to de-escalate situations? And I say that, how do you, not him, on purpose?
No, I agree. Yes, because the woman, fortunately for us, we are so powerful that we can escalate an incident and we can de-escalate an incident. Women have that power. We have that power to escalate and we have that power to de-escalate. Now, usually I trained myself. I did not go through any formal training before I got married. I just trained myself to be in that position where I decided that my attitude, I was completely in charge of my attitude. But I learned something very valuable from one of your guests here, Mark Caro Vando, Reverend Caro, Dr. Caro Vando, a very powerful, and I've been using that phrase ever since. She said something very profound on your show here. I think that was maybe 2 years ago when she was a guest on your show, a guest speaker. She said, and there's a biblical verse that she used. She said, women were created to direct men, to support men, to make good of their lives. Women were created to support men, to make good out of their lives. Therefore, once a man gets on your nerves, your husband gets on your nerves, turn and look at him and say, the only reason I am going to not retaliate or react to your foolishness is because God asked me personally to come into your life to make your life better. So I am here working for God and not for you. I am here working for God and not for you. Bring all his things, put all those his ideas and make him see how foolish he is to even try to get on your nerves. If men know what is good for them, I'm telling you, my audience who are listening, if men understand what they want out of their lives and how good their lives can be, they will respect and honor the woman who is in their lives. They will respect and honor their wives.
Lillian, I'll not be surprised if you give some matching orders to Professor Wap. Go right.
Oh no, I don't. I do not give matching orders. No, I don't. I do not give
That's
matching
brilliant.
orders. No.
Now, time for me to bring the learned lawyer. There's a lot of discussion. Again, look, guys, Dr. Dita, Ivo Dita, Dr. Dita, you can call, anybody can dial in. The number, all of you know, 240-603-7367, 240-603-7367. If you're overseas, you can do a WhatsApp call. That'll be fine, 001, and then you dial the rest of the numbers. Now we bring on our learned lawyer, Lawyer Joyce. I got a line from Lillian, and I asked her the question on purpose because I was using it as a transition to get to you. Women have the power to escalate or de-escalate. Does the woman have some responsibility when matters go up in flames, and it escalates. Because she did not use her power to de-escalate. What would you as a lawyer say?
Okay, unfortunately, the law does not. If you look at the statute of the law, it's blind. It's blind to sex. So when it comes to the law, I think everybody should take responsibility for their action. Criminal responsibility is personal. So if um, someone feels provoked or triggered and has to retaliate and resort to violence, I don't see how that is any other person's responsibility than the abuser's responsibility. So it is true that people would justify provocation as a result, as a cause for violence or as a cause for negative behavior. But everyone is responsible for themselves. You can only take responsibility for your reaction, and I can take responsibility for my action. So if I provoke you, you can also be the wise person, you can also be the mature person to not react to that provocation, or to react in a subtle way. Likewise, if I were to see a reaction that I could de-escalate, it's wisdom to apply de-escalation techniques at that moment. But regardless of what happens, we've had men shoot their wives or beat their wives because they were allegedly having an affair. There are other ways that we can always handle situations without resorting to violence. So yes, I agree that we can de-escalate situations, but each person should assume responsibility for their own action at every time.
Lawyer Nyamboli, in law, there's something called manslaughter and first degree or second degree murder. A fight breaks out, somebody dies. What is manslaughter at that point? What would be manslaughter and what would be first degree murder, first or second degree murder?
The difference usually lies in intention. It's not, the outcome, the consequence is the same, but the motive and the intention is what is going to differentiate the two. So I did not leave my house coming out here to fight and kill somebody, but unfortunately we got into a fight and I gave a fatal blow that killed the person. That is manslaughter. The person ended up dead. Versus you leaving your house or coming into your room and you find your wife with another man and you walk to your closet and pull out a gun, load it and pull the trigger. That is murder. So the intention at the time is what is going to be the difference, and would usually would the sentencing would show the difference with the two crimes.
There are situations that the man is to pay child support. How does the law get to deciding whether the children go to live with the woman or with the man?
So in matters that concern the children, the paramount interest welfare of the child is what is taken into consideration. Who is the better parent here? Who is the parent who has more resources that would offer the child a better quality of life? Quality of life here is holistic. It means it is both physical, emotional, moral, whatever thing we're looking at. It's not just about financial. So that's why you see, from the most part, they're going to ask the person who has the finances but lacks the moral capability to pay child support to the person who has the moral ability, the time, the devotion, the commitment to take care of their children. So the court would always weigh both options. For children who are very young, usually under the age of 10, there's a natural attraction towards the mother because the mother would nurse the children and the growth will tend. But there's some fathers who are really good fathers and they are better parents than the mothers who actually birthed these children. And the court will always lean in favor of the better parent. So both financial, moral, emotional, psychological aspects are taken into consideration when making decisions that concern the welfare of a child.
Very good. I will bring on Lillian because at some point, it's such a beautiful topic. Honestly, we could be here all night, especially when I'm talking to very knowledgeable people fluent, articulate speakers like you, Lillian, the Reverend Dr. Joseph Jimbo. We could be here till tomorrow morning, but all good things have an end. Absolutely. I would bring you for your last word, but before then, that happens, let me bring up Lillian Fomunung to share with us what the nuggets, what her last thoughts for this evening would be. Lillian, on the platform one more time.
First of all, Divine, I have to say thank you so much for shining a light on such an important subject as domestic violence. There is no place for domestic violence in our society, and unfortunately the data or the statistic does not it's not a very good one. The statistics actually says that 1 in 4 women are violated, 1 in 3 men are violated. Therefore, so we see that our society violence is coming up more and more. There is so much going on around the world that the least we need is the domestic, within the domestic phase, which is supposed to be the sanctuary for husband, wife, and children. We have also injected violence into it, and it's so sad. But I want to say also for those listening, and I know this might sound like preaching, but it is never enough. The church still holds a very strong moral foundation onto how we must treat each other. If we come from a position of love towards each other, then this violence will be toned down, which we don't need in our communities. Our children are suffering out there in the world as much as it is already. They don't need a violent environment to grow up in. Therefore, we as parents must, it is a must, it is a huge responsibility. Put their interests first. If you find yourself in a violent position, please seek help if you are the perpetrator. And if you are the victim, please leave before it turns into something different. If you die, we will only come here and quote statistics. And unfortunately, your life is more valuable than the statistics we are quoting. So please seek help if you are prone to violence. It is not a shame. And if you are a victim, please go away, move away out of the situation before you become another number. May the soul of this pastor in Nigeria rest in peace. But unfortunately, Need Divine, she is not going to be the last we will be talking about.
Lillian, there's a text that just came in. I have to read that text to you, to my phone. Each time when somebody dies or somebody's being battered, living in terror, the question is, why did they continue to live there? They're not chained there. They're not. You're not a tree. You are not a building. You're not a mountain. Yeah, so how do you leave your house and come back still to the abuser?
Yeah,
it's perplexing. That's the essence of the text I've just received. I'm going to ask the same question to the other panelist, Lillian.
But unfortunately, the answer to that, there is really no formula. It has nothing to do with your financial status or your educational status. There is something which is called battered woman syndrome. It is a real thing. Battered woman syndrome is a real thing. Some have lived so long in the abuse that they know no other way, whether abuse from childhood or abuse from within the marriage, they know no other way other than to be back in that situation. Spousal abuse or battered woman syndrome is a real thing, and it requires professional help to be able to extricate yourself from that situation.
There's a question coming in from China. I'm going to ask 2 questions. The question I've just asked you and the one that Jum Jinyo, he's in China, just texted. I can see that. What possibly explains the high level of violence / divorce among African couples as soon as they set foot in the United States or Europe? What's going on, Lillian?
Too much. Just too much. The pressures of the society itself, the pressures of the society, and some people term it the sudden awareness of what you can do as a female in this country, the powers that you have. But for that, I will also say, yes, these are contributing factors, but it is not the only reason. There are too many factors that come into play that account for the high level of divorce among African couples. Yes. Too many factors. No one single thing. Yes.
All right, Lillian, let me at this point bring up, I thought that was your last word, was it?
Yes.
Okay, let me now bring up the learned lawyer, lawyer Joyce Nyamboli, and I'm going to ask her the same question. Joyce, these things happen year in, year out. Today is a Cameroonian couple. Tomorrow is Nigerian. Tomorrow is the other day Sierra Leone. Why? I'm going to ask you the same question that somebody is texting from China. What happens that when women come, when couples come, they were living peacefully in Africa, they come to Europe or the United States, trouble starts. What have been your observations? I mean, I'm sure that probably you've had 200 cases. If not, your colleagues have.
Of course, definitely people come into the land of freedom to, you have a lot of choices, you have a lot of resources. So you ask yourself, why would I have to take what I have been taking all these years when here it's okay to live uh, without any fear or stigma? I'm able to work as much as I want and make as much money as I can without necessarily sucking up someone else's you know bad habits or things that are I have been tolerating for so long. You learn to believe that I can live a life without any fear, of what society thinks. I don't have to worry. Usually you find people who got married for the wrong reasons, or maybe even the right reasons, but have endured a lot. And when they come here, they're like, enough is enough. Because now I can call the police on you if you try to beat me. Now I can ask for child support if I have to leave, so I'm not going to be destitute with my children. Now I can work and be my own person and pursue my own dreams without putting my life on hold for you to go and be you. So it goes both ways with men and women, right? And not that it's a good thing, but it shows you what is missing in Africa. We say we don't have high divorce rates. Is it because we love marriage or the institution of marriage so much that, or our marriages are better than those here? No, it's when they come here, it shows you that it's because we lack the resources, we lack the same opportunities that the people over here have. That's why we stay married in Africa, not because we're actually enjoying these marriages. So we have to learn to draw a difference between people who are married and who are happily married. Happily married people would stay married regardless of where they are, but people who are just married for whatever the purposes are, they would definitely come. When they leave and go to somewhere where they have a different environment, you see them, their marriages start falling apart.
And the persistent question, you being tortured, you being terrorized, you're not chained to your bedpost, you are not in the basement locked up there. You leave, you go to church, you go to the market, and you come right back. It's like living, you fell into a lion's den, you're fortunate to escape alive, and you walk right back into that den. That's the question many people are asking. What's your answer, ma'am?
Yeah. Domestic violence is a power struggle. It's someone who tries to have control over another person. So it is a manipulating scheme. It is a power struggle. It is a show of superiority. So, like Miss Lillian said, some of these people, that's the only way of life they know. Some others are so afraid. It may shock you to know that most people who have homicides that have been, there's a statistic I read just this afternoon. Victims of homicides, sorry, of people who were issued restraining orders. I forgot what it was captioned, but like when the woman leaves the abusive relationship and gets a restraining order, 1 of 5 of those women are murdered within the first 3 months of getting that restraining order.
Okay, just hold it there. There's somebody on the line from Mali in Africa. Bel Sonke, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm on the line.
Yes.
Good evening.
Do you have a question? Do you have a question?
Uh,
Do you have a question? or a contribution?
No, I have a comment. Hi Joyce, good to see you.
Hi, good to hear from you.
Okay. The challenge, to start with, the challenge is that victims do not even understand what abuse is all about. To start with, most often at times, they don't even know what abuse is. You had this question about talking about when people get to Europe, their marriages break. The issue is that there are available resources in Africa, but they are not utilized. I think, Joyce, we worked on a couple of cases in a platform. Some of them don't have the courage. They're underutilized. I'll take, for example, in a country like Mali where I work, domestic violence is, like shunned at. But unfortunately, people don't take advantage of the resources. They are more, in as much as they are in a Muslim country, they are even more advanced in terms of resources and their laws than Cameroon. But they're so yoked into their culture. 2 weeks ago, I received a colleague who had been in abuse for 10 years, only to discover that she had a broken nose. That's when she's running away from the abuse. So it boils down to nobody is free from abuse. Those who work, people from all levels. I remember one first lady who was abused. So you ask yourself, what is happening? I think there's a problem of self-leadership. I earlier said that people don't know that they are going through abuse. Self-leadership. What values do you have as a person? In as much as I want to take, for example, if I grew up in an abusive house where my father was beating my mom or my mom was, I am not supposed to, I have to seek for help. We have to seek for help. And this is why we are creating awareness. I want to thank you for this platform. We need to tell people, we need to tell our children that abuse is not normal. Because I will tell you for free, it seems as if the abuse is for men below the age of 45. Because our generation, the abuse in our generation, when I say generation, is the 50 plus, is not as what we're seeing. Because 20 years ago, we were not hearing the abuse as it is now. What is happening to our society?
Okay, thank you.
You will say the bride price. The bride price has nothing to do.
All right. Thank you, Belson. What time is it in Mali now? I'll have the panelists respond to you. What time is it in Mali now?
Okay. It's almost 2:30.
Wow, the wee hours of the morning. Okay, thank you so much for connecting live from. Are you in Bamako?
Yeah, I'm in Bamako.
Thank you so much. It was nice talking to you, my friend.
My pleasure.
All right.
Sister Bell has worked with me on several projects, and I'm really happy that she could take up the phone to call at this early hour of the morning. But just to piggyback on what she was saying, it is people do not know, they don't recognize abuse, and even those who recognize abuse are in fear because they're under constant threats. If you leave, I would kill you. If you this, I would that. If you make that phone call, I'm going to do this. So they go around with the fear that even if I run away, this man can find me. And we have statistics show that 1 in 5 women who flee abusive partners, who file restraining orders, end up dead. So you see that it's not just something about people coming back to their hellhole. They feel like they have no choice. And that is why we have to make them aware of the resources that are available. You find people who live in luxurious houses. How do you run away from your husband, for example, and then you have to go sleep in a female shelter with everybody? The resources that are there are not maybe available or suitable, but the most part is people are not aware of the existence of these resources and how to take advantage of them. And they don't know how to come up with a safety plan to plan their escape.
Lillian, I know I had asked for your last word, but I'd like you to respond to Belsonke. Then I just saw Reverend Dr. Joseph. He's back online, so I'll bring him to conclude the program with me. But Lillian, you are being threatened, you plural. A woman is being threatened that if you leave, I'm going to kill you. Should the woman just stay there or leave after all?
Okay, so to answer this question, sometimes it's just an empty threat, even though statistics, like Joyce rightly says, shows that women who have run away have been killed. Okay, but then you take that chance because you never know if he's going to find you or he's going to be dead before even finding you. All right, so but that's one thing. But we can also use a platform like this for sensitization. The thing too about it, which I forgot to reiterate, and I want to say that now, is women, mothers of boys, please raise your sons to be the husbands that you did not have. Raise your sons to be that husband that you wish for. Raise your sons right to respect women. If you do raise those sons right, I think they too will in turn respect the women. Sometimes the women of victims, the women of domestic violence are even in that hole, being more violated by their mothers-in-laws and their sisters-in-laws, and they add to that abuse of that woman in that house. So this is a plea also to mothers of boys: raise your sons to be the husbands that you wished for.
Beautiful. I'm going to take Lillian off the platform, and then you just give us in 1 minute, Joyce, your last word, and then I'll bring on Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimbo to conclude the show with him. I lost your audio. Yes, I lost your audio. I'm not sure
sorry,
why.
I turned off my mic.
All right, yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
My last word would be to anyone who is undergoing any form of domestic abuse, whether it is psychological, mental, sexual, verbal, or physical, to remove yourself from the situation. You can only resolve a problem or fix your relationship if you are alive. And my second word is to our community, to our society, whether it's the church or the African society or just as human beings, that we be supportive to those who are going through any form of domestic violence. Let's not stigmatize them. Let's not coerce them. Let's listen to their story, and let's offer resources and pointers and ask questions. How are you doing? And how can I help you? To make these people have a reason to leave, or see resources that are available to them if they decide to leave that kind of situation. And I hope that we all learn to love and respect each other as human beings, because that is what Christ has shown us today, Easter Sunday, by dying for our sins and making us all, grow and live in love.
Thank you so much, Joyce, for your last word. I will bring up Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajimbo. We intended for this to be a conversation around marriage, religion, culture, and the law. And I hope that we accomplished that mission. I hope that you picked, you meaning the people, the viewers, the listeners. By the way, this broadcast is on YouTube, so you can follow it on YouTube. You can go share it on YouTube. Talk to your friends to go there and follow. This is really, really, really beautiful material, instructive, deep, insightful. I just love the speakers this evening. Now, time for me to bring up the Reverend Joseph Ajimbo. Sorry, we lost you, sir, because of connectivity issues.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. What would be your last word for the evening? I mean, you are the man of God, and all this was triggered off by the death of Pastor Osinachi Nwachukwu. Not to say that her case is isolated, I said that from the beginning, but to say that her death kind of shines light on the so many cases of domestic terror. What's your last word, sir?
My last word would be, first of all, that marriage between two persons should be properly prepared. And people in making choices should study each other's background very carefully. That's why in the traditional society, before two young people were married, the families conducted a background check to find out if the person who intended to marry their daughter, or their daughter who had brought in a young man to be married to, had any issues in their family that could replay in the life of the intending couples. And so it is good that people prepare and study each other for quite some time and not rush into marriage for the sake of just physical attractiveness or what sometimes it's a sexual attractiveness. Secondly, one of the things, as I said, is that we, over the years, we have tried to battle with the issue of patriarchal society, and then the society which is structured with based on the man. And so our gender studies and some of the Christian programs that we have carried out, including even your own here, has been to bring the balance, to show that we are all human beings, and man and woman are equal, and not in the sense as some would say, oh, they can never be equal, but equal in the sense that they value each other, and then they respect each other, and they love each other. Because I cannot see how two people who come into marriage and one will, if you, I cannot see how I will slap my left hand or my left hand will slap my right hand. If a man and a woman are truly married and truly love themselves, I don't see how you can beat your own partner. And the third thing I would like to say is that before people get into marriage, women should be given the training that is necessary for them to be independent. Because some of the issues that hang around when if something happens and we are counseling people and the woman is crying there and is saying, well, I depend on the man. Without the man, I cannot live on my own. But I think if a woman has her own resources, a woman is, before they get to marriage, the woman has her own job, and the woman shares responsibility. They can talk on equal terms with the husband, and they study the same things, read the same books, and they can educate each other and counsel each other. After all, there's something like peer counseling, peer education. So if two people come into marriage and they respect each other, I think that marriage will be able to survive. And as we say, we are all in the presence of God. And I still emphasize, Sister Lilia may disagree with me, but I still emphasize that God created us male and female equal. And then we have to see each other in that term. And when I said that the idea of substituting the words, I did not mean dogmatically, but I meant that because society takes those words seriously. And so if society is going to take those words seriously, no matter what interpretation we give to them, they do not take it. So we have to find another way of transposing them so that at least people can appreciate that the words are interchangeable, and two partners can live coexistent under the canopy of God.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Joseph Ajinvo. Now, before I go, let me share this with you. I've got some beautiful daughters. And if somebody came and married one of them, and for heaven's sake, laid their hands on one of my daughters, you'll be lucky if you see the police first before me, because when I get there, it will be so nasty, you'll regret that you ever met me as a father-in-law. I have to be clear about this, because far too many women are being killed by those who should be protecting them. We have to draw these lines, and women, let me tell you this, if you are going to marry somebody, one way you know how somebody is going to be, watch how the person behaves when they do not have their way. Watch when somebody is unhappy, that's when the real stuff comes out. It's very easy to have a guy, to have a woman, to go to the beach, to go to the nightclub, to go to parties, and you think you have a jackpot called husband-to-be. You don't know that you are soon to deal with a crocodile. I said at the beginning of the program, Lillian, that there's this young lady, Lorian Sonko. Why I bring up her name now is to queue up with what Reverend Joseph Ajingo just said. Women should be trained to be independent. This young woman, her parents pressurized her to get married, and she said no. She refused and decided to start a 6-man company which now builds ecological cookers. Had she listened to her parents, she would be in a man's house, doing nothing, reliant wholly on the man, and who knows what happens next. So I thank you, Lorian. I know that I'll tell children to obey their parents, but if your parents are going to tell you to get married instead of or in lieu of empowering yourself economically, you ought to think about that decision before heeding your parents' call. Thank you for watching. I want to thank Mama Beatrice Moma. I want to thank Mrs. Tata Seraphine for supporting Cash with some cash. Lorian Sonko, if you want to support that young lady, please let me know. She's a dynamite. Lillian, when I asked her how many people work for her, here was her response. They don't work for me. They are my team members. That is a 22-year-old girl. I was so impressed. Guys, thank you so much for watching this broadcast. That's where we end it all. Oh, by the way, on the 22nd, we have a volcanic political program. I'm expecting lots of articulate, sometimes controversial speakers to be on that show on the 22nd. It'll be a Friday on the Anglophone conflict, the armed conflict in Anglophone Cameroon. You don't want to miss that. Thank you for watching. That's how we wrap up this edition of Voices of Africa at Chat Night. My name is Divine Chamakong. Goodbye.
I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I'm coming to get down. I'm coming to dance, We're gonna dance, we're gonna get down, we're gonna party hardy. We're gonna boogie woogie, and when we jam, it's out of sight. This song right here, it's dynamite. I'm ready, I'm coming.